Remember all those articles you sent over about companies like tripping over themselves to jump on that AI bandwagon?
Yeah.
Well, get ready to dust off those metaphorical decoder rings
Mhm.
because we're diving deep into Deloitte's latest report on generative AI.
Okay.
And let me tell you, the honeymoon phase,
Yeah.
it's officially over.
It really is fascinating to see this whole transition from all the hype at the beginning to this more grounded, like results-oriented view.
Yep.
Just a few months ago, generative AI was the magical solution, going to fix every problem a business has. And now companies are like, okay, hold on, show me what you got.
Yeah, it's less can AI do everything
Hmm.
and much more show me the money. And Deloitte actually calls this the shift from potential to performance. So it's less about the wow factor and a lot more about hard proof that AI can actually deliver some real value.
Exactly. We're seeing a lot of companies shift their focus to AI applications that have a clear impact, measurable impact on their bottom line. Things like, say, reducing customer acquisition costs, or even optimizing pricing strategies, maybe predicting and preventing churn.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of use cases that get CFOs really, really excited these days.
Yeah, no, we're just throwing money at anything with AI in the name. But this report also said that actually, most companies are really struggling to get these AI projects off the ground. So what's the deal with that?
That is the challenge of scaling. And it's a challenge that trips up a lot of companies. Imagine you're trying to bake a cupcake, right? New
Mm.
recipe.
Okay.
Relatively straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine trying to scale that recipe to bake thousands of cupcakes,
Hmm.
all perfectly uniform, and you're going to distribute them everywhere.
Mass production.
Yeah, exactly. That requires a totally different way of doing things. Planning, investment, operational efficiency.
And that's where things get really complicated with AI.
It seems so, yeah. Deloitte actually found that a whopping 68%, that's a lot of organizations, have only been able to get 30% or fewer of their AI experiments into full production.
Wow.
The
Wow.
ambition is there, but actually bridging that gap between a successful pilot project and actually deploying it widely,
No.
significant hurdle.
So what's the missing ingredient? Is it just a lack of technical expertise or is there something else going on?
While technical expertise is definitely crucial, the report pointed to a much more fundamental issue. Might surprise you.
Okay.
Data.
Uh,
Turns out, even the most sophisticated AI useless without the right fuel. And by right fuel, I mean good data. High quality, clean, well-organized data.
yeah, it's like trying to, I don't know, run a Tesla on coal. It's just not going to happen.
Precisely. You need that right energy source to power the machine. And this is where things get really interesting from a business perspective,
Yep.
because a lot of companies are realizing that their data infrastructure,
Yep.
the one that's worked for them for a long time, can't handle the demands of these big, large-scale generative AI projects.
So it's not even really a tech issue. It's a core business issue.
Mm-hmm.
And this reminds me of that article about data lifecycle management you sent over. What does that even mean in the context of AI?
Right. So you've probably heard data lifecycle management before,
Yeah.
but what it really boils down to is managing data from the very beginning, like creation, all the way through to when you finally get rid of it, deletion. And this becomes even more critical in this world of AI. We're talking about having the right processes and systems in place to like collect data, clean it, store it, keep it secure, and then analyze these huge, huge amounts of data. And very, very importantly, you need to be able to do all of that in a way that's efficient, scalable, and complies with all the regulations, which are changing all the time, of
Sounds
course.
like a lot.
It can be, yeah. The report found that a full three quarters of organizations have had to spend more on technology just in this area.
Yeah.
And that's all because of generative AI. And we're not just talking about buying more servers. This is about completely rethinking how they deal with data. Data as a strategic asset.
Which I imagine that's not an overnight fix.
No, you're absolutely right. This is not a sprint. This is a marathon, and preparation is key. In fact, the report actually highlights a really interesting anecdote from a former VP of data and intelligence at a media company.
Okay.
So they were working on this innovative AI project, really interesting, but they hit a wall. And it wasn't the technology, it was the data.
Yeah.
They just didn't have enough properly labeled data to use to train the AI.
It really makes you think about all those foundational elements, right? Especially when everyone's so focused on the super advanced AI stuff. But all this talk about these data challenges, that's got to have some pretty big implications when it comes to risk and regulation, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This isn't just, oh, let's get our data organized. This is about using data responsibly, ethically. And that's where things get really, really complicated.
Okay, so let's dive into that a bit. What are some of the worries around risk and regulation that companies are dealing with these days? I mean, AI can be unpredictable, right?
It's not really about AI being unpredictable. It's more that we're all still kind of making up the rules as we go along. It's a new playing field. And I think companies are starting to realize that without the right guardrails in place, AI could end up having some consequences that nobody intended.
Like, give me an example.
Well, there's algorithmic bias.
Hmm.
If you're training an AI on a data set that's got those, well, existing societal biases in it, the AI can actually make those biases even worse.
Right.
And that leads to, well, discrimination, even if that was never, ever the intention.
So it's not just about the code or the algorithms, it's the data that we're feeding into it and how that data could end up causing real harm.
Exactly. And then there's data privacy, big one with generative AI. Companies are using these massive, massive data sets to train their AI models, right? And a lot of times those data sets have personal information in them, so they have to be incredibly careful about how they're collecting that data, storing it, and using it.
It's a real balancing act, isn't it?
Yep.
Got all this potential with AI, but you also have to protect people, protect the privacy, make sure that no one is being harmed.
Yeah, it is. It's like walking a tightrope. And here's the kicker. It's a tightrope that's constantly moving. The regulations around AI are changing all the time. Creates a lot of uncertainty for businesses. Remember how we were talking about that 68% statistic?
The organizations that are struggling to actually deploy their AI projects.
Yeah. Well, Deloitte found that 3 of the top 4 biggest roadblocks, the things that are stopping companies from using AI more widely, they're all about risk, regulation, and governance.
So it's not just a technology problem to solve. It's like this legal and ethical minefield.
In a way, yeah. But it's interesting, the Deloitte report also found that like a significant majority of business leaders actually agree that the government needs to step in and regulate AI more.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So even the people who are building these systems are saying like, hey, we need some rules here.
It makes sense when you think about it. Having clear regulations, it actually helps to make things fair for everyone. It promotes responsible innovation and helps people trust this technology, which is good for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. But let's be practical for a second. All of this, the data challenges, the risk stuff, trying to comply with all these regulations, it's got to be expensive. So are companies actually seeing any return on their AI investments? Or is this all just hype?
$1 million question, right? And Deloitte really hits on this. Companies are under a lot of pressure to show that generative AI is actually worth it.
So no more blank checks for the AI team.
Not quite,
Yeah.
but there is a huge shift happening. Companies want measurable results. They want a clear ROI. It's not enough to just say, oh, AI is going to make us super innovative. They want to see the receipts.
Which means they need a way to measure the impact that AI is actually having.
Exactly. And here's the thing. Over 40% of the companies Deloitte talked to, they said they're struggling to do this. They're having trouble figuring out how to define and measure the impact of their generative AI projects.
It's like they're throwing darts with a blindfold on, hoping to hit the bullseye, but they don't even know where the bullseye is.
That's a great way to put it. It highlights this really fundamental challenge. You have all these companies, and they all want to jump on this AI bandwagon, but they haven't actually figured out what success looks like. What are their goals? How are they going to measure it? It's pretty baffling when you think about it.
Yeah, if I was spending millions on a new technology, I definitely want to know it was working.
You would think, right? But you have to remember that this is all still so new. A lot of these businesses are figuring things out on the fly, not just how to build the AI and make it work, but how to measure it in a way that makes sense for their business.
So everyone's learning as they go,
Oh.
even the experts.
Exactly. In fact, the Deloitte report actually says that we might need completely new ways to measure this stuff.
New metrics.
Yeah, because those traditional financial metrics, they might not tell the whole story when it comes to generative AI.
Right, like trying to figure out if a concert was successful by only counting how many tickets they sold. You're missing out on the artistic part, the energy from the crowd. It's more than just numbers.
Exactly. Sometimes the value is in what you can't count. The creative breakthroughs, the really innovative solutions, the new ideas that come from using AI. That stuff is really hard to put into numbers and spreadsheets.
So let's bring this home. What does all of this mean for our listeners? The people who've been reading all those AI articles and really trying to keep up. Because we've covered a lot. All that initial hype, the very real challenges, scaling things up, data management, risk. proving that it's worth the investment.
Right. The key takeaway here is that this generative AI revolution, it's here, but it's not like flipping a switch. It's more of an evolution, gradual, but big. And this evolution, it requires a certain way of thinking. You need to be strategic, have realistic expectations, and be ready to adapt because the technology is going to keep changing.
So it's less about jumping on the latest trend and more about those core fundamentals. Getting those right, and then you can be successful.
Yes. And sometimes focusing on the basics, like a solid data infrastructure, good governance, being able to explain the value of your AI projects, that's how you'll unlock the true potential of all of this.
It's like building a house. You don't start with the fancy countertops. You got to build a strong foundation first. Right. And that takes time and planning.
Precisely. And you need to be patient. Never give up. Always be learning. Those things are essential.
There you have it. Generative AI isn't going anywhere, but it's not magic either. It's a journey. You have to really think about it, plan it out, and be ready for the challenges and the incredible opportunities that this technology brings.
And maybe more importantly, be curious. Ask questions. Don't believe everything you hear.
I like it. So don't believe the hype, question everything, and always look for proof. And sometimes the best, most innovative solutions come from really understanding those basic principles.
Words to live by, especially with how quickly things are changing these days.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, we'll leave you to think about the future of generative AI and what it means for you. Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and as always, keep diving deep.